Welcome to Movies That Matter, the podcast about recent films going above and beyond the call of box office returns to boldly explore a social issue affecting people's lives. I'm your host, Nicole, and with me today is...
Sari Houston.
And Stacy Moore.
Yay! Welcome back, Stacy!
Thanks, it feels good to be back.
And thank you, Sari, for joining us. And this week, we're going to overanalyze Hidden Figures. Hidden Figures is the incredible untold story of Katherine G. Johnson, played by Taraji P. Henson, Dorothy Vaughan, played by Octavia Spencer, and Mary Jackson, played by Janelle Monáe, brilliant African-American women working at NASA who served as the brains behind one of the greatest operations in history, the launch of astronaut John Glenn into orbit. So that's our plot summary. Kicking things off, what did people think of the movie?
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was familiar with the historical concept. I was really happy when I learned that it was going to be a movie, and really pleased with the way that they were able to pull it together, as well as the actors that they got. So I was incredibly thrilled.
Cool. Yeah, somebody asked me what they thought I was going to talk about on this podcast, and it was like, well, worst case scenario, 40 minutes of me trying to convince Taraji P. Henson to marry me.
Love her.
I love her. I have a really big crush on her. So, what'd you think,
Really?
Stacy?
I felt like her performance left me so cold.
Did it?
Yeah. I don't know. And I do it. This movie in particular makes me wonder if I'm just not a good judge of acting, because
we did like Colin Farrell in The Lobster.
Correct. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's one of a sticking point for me and Nicole. But no, I felt like Octavia Spencer blew me out of the water, but she always does.
Yeah.
Of course.
And it's hard because Octavia Spencer is the bomb. Like, you know what I mean? It's a little difficult. And I think I may have, and I see where you're coming from, because I've heard a few comments about, some of the different acting. And I think it is when you kind of are comparing.
You can't go up against Octavia Spencer and hope to come out looking good. But I mean, apparently she did, because loads of people loved Taraji P. Henson's performance. People went nuts for Janelle Monáe.
Yeah.
And I thought she was fine.
Yeah, I was going to say I would probably totally do Octavia first, then Taraji, and then Monáe. But yeah, that was interesting to say the least. And I think a little bit of me just loved really the historical context. And so I think that kind of made me fill in for a little bit. And I actually have to also plug Taraji as a Howard University alum.
Woohoo!
So, that's
awesome.
my alma mater.
Go Bisons,
yeah,
right?
Bisons, totally. So I'm like, I feel like she can't do anything wrong.
Right.
Yeah, no, I felt the same way. I failed to mention on our last podcast that Billy Crudup is a Tar Heel. It's always like, it's a little soft spot. Yeah, I felt like, I honestly was worried that it was going to be a crappy movie. Like, that it was just going to be not well done.
Lifetime movie.
Yeah, and I was like, this was actually technically a better movie than I thought it was going to be. So that part I was very happy about.
There were some cliches, though. Like all of the, Good Will Hunting chalkboard scenes, or the pull-in focus and everyone's gathering around while she's in the restroom and like, who did this? I was like, okay, there were 2 or 3 of those.
Yeah, there were. And I thought it's really hard to escape the long shadow of Apollo 13 and getting the space stuff done. I will say this, I'm very glad they actually used the real footage.
Nice.
I'm glad they didn't do like a CGI of the shuttle launches.
Yeah. I thought I was interested too, because, when you see the previews before you go, a lot of times when you go see something, then only the previews are like the high points. Yeah. I was really pleased that there were a lot of other high points throughout the movie that weren't necessarily captured.
They saved you some.
Yeah, they saved you some. So, which was really, really nice. I think, the historical context of it, the fact that, for even a plug of, today is the Women's March, and just kind of like that kind of, women rock, women rule type thing. And then just kind of the concept of even just being African-American women at that, right? And, what that actually meant. I think for me, especially with the interest of having my nieces and folks and taking them to see it and really enjoying that and being able to kind of see another side. And I think that ties into even kind of breaking the barrier of even dealing with, science, and that it's, mostly a male-driven field, and to see, these women do a phenomenal job and be a part of history, but a hidden part of history to some extent, I think is a really powerful concept.
Yeah, and again, my concern was that they were going to screw it up. Like, honestly, and I thought I liked the score. It had a retro vibe. I find it jarring sometimes when you watch period pieces and some very modern piece of music comes on, and I'm just like, I'm supposed to be in the 60s. Like, don't play something that's so obviously not from that era.
And it was contemporary, but it was Neo Soul, which is it's such a
so I'm saying now. It was contemporary, but it wasn't like this sounds so far out of the 60s, which I thought was good.
Yeah.
I really liked. There was, it was funny. I was saying to Spencer when we wrapped up the last podcast, I was like, boy, I haven't made a comment about lighting in a movie yet. Like, no one has done anything too impressive with lighting, and I've been watching for it. And this movie, I thought, did a really good job with the lighting and like having the scenes where like the geniuses are like well lit and everybody else is kind of in the dark. I thought was nice thematically. There's that scene where she gets shut out of the control room after redoing all the calculations for John Glenn, and she's standing in the shadow of the door, and she like peeks into the light and then peeks back into the shadow. And I thought, oh, good job. Like, yes, there's lighting I can talk about in this movie. Like, they didn't just phone it in. Wasn't a Lifetime movie. And the other thing I loved, I don't know if you noticed the costuming. The men were always in
beautiful,
but the men were always in like white or black ties. The two other women were always in neutrals. The Kirsten Dunst character and the other woman who works with Catherine. And then the only people who wear color in the entire movie are the three main characters. Like, it's really interesting. They set them at all. Yeah, they set them off in color where everybody else is very neutral or dull.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there were a lot of things. Again, it was just a much better movie than I had come in with extremely low expectations.
I felt like there was something for everybody in this movie. So there were certain relationships that I felt like were sort of in your face and on the nose. Like Kevin Costner's, supervisor, he's the manager of the group. His relationship with Taraji P. Henson and, forgive me, the guy from Big Bang Theory.
Yeah, Sheldon Cooper.
Thank you. So the three of them had a very, Jim Parsons, thank you. Had a very obvious, like, you could see where this is going. Like, you could see he's the sort of the villain. Jim Parsons is kind of the villain that's going to try to keep, Catherine down, and Kevin Costner is the good-hearted, like, the sort of like benevolent king of of this group that's going to really lay out the righteousness, and that's all very. The audience that I saw the movie with really responded to that, and there was a lot of like actual clapping, like at certain points.
Yeah, my audience clapped and cheered.
Right, like they got really.
I believe I yelled, "Oh no, they didn't!" when the coffee pot, her separate coffee pot,
and no coffee in it at that.
I was like, I just saw it, and like I can't. I yell like, at movies.
No,
I just out loud. I was like, "Oh no, they didn't."
and I want to give Kevin Costner the award for best line of the film. When in the scene where I kind of groaned a little bit when he's like knocking the
sign, the colored
quote colored women's restroom sign down, and everyone in the theater is clapping, and I'm like, this is a little too. It's so in your face. It's so like obvious. And then as he walks away, he goes, "Here at NASA, we all pee the same color." And I was like, all right, I'm in.
Yeah.
That was a great line.
My favorite line was when, and again, I'm just going to call him Richard from the 4400 because we went through this with Moonlight. Mahershala Ali. I don't know how to pronounce his first name. He played the colonel that she ends up marrying. I love that dude. The first thing I saw him in was the TV show The 4400. Yeah. I know. I was like, he's Richard from the 4400. I love that actor for so long. And he and Janelle Monáe were in Moonlight together, which I thought was interesting. But so when she gives her little set down, And she goes, they don't hire us because we wear skirts. They hire us because we wear glasses.
I'm like, nerds unite.
Yes!
Nerds unite.
So my favorite part
that
of the movie.
That was a great line.
That was.
So as a woman who formerly wore glasses and is in STEM, I was like, yeah. That's a great line.
But I wanted to mention that, like, so that relationship, those dynamics are really good for someone. This is sounding really condescending, but someone who really responds to that, more overt dynamic. Whereas I responded much more to Octavia Spencer's character's relationship with, so Catherine Vaughn's character with her supervisor, as portrayed by Kirsten Dunst, which they sort of develop throughout the film, and like Kirsten Dunst does not come off well. Her character does not come off well. Like she's that woman that you're like, she's a woman of her time and like a product of her environment, but she actually does grow and their relationship changes. And at the end, when she addresses, thank you, you're welcome, Mrs. Vaughn, and refers to her as Mrs. Vaughn. Like I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. Like that was such a good moment, and like their relationship like changing over the course of the film. Like that was actually really satisfying.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I liked, even the humanity of it as well. So for instance, Octavia's role was one where, she was asking for, right? She's requesting something, and she is, aware of just, the way in which things operate. And so I loved even how Octavia took opportunities to even make herself even more, relevant. Like, all right, so we need to start shifting. And it was really,
she saw the future.
Yeah. And made that a point. But I think the humanity of stuff. So even, thinking about Octavia when kind of reaching out to Kirsten's character with like, where are we standing with, the position? Because I'm doing the work.
Right. So she's trying to get a supervisor position. She's doing the work of a supervisor, and she's not being,
compensated
given
or
the title with the compensation.
Yeah. And so just kind of how that kind of manifested itself. Even I can't remember the line, but Kirsten just being like, oh, I'm really sorry. I don't need, I know you won't believe this, but I don't have anything against you people. Yes.
Yeah, and Octavia Spencer just looks there and goes, I know you think you don't.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can see it really like hits home with her.
But I like that aspect of like, it's not being flipped, but just also being really, spot on, I thought. So I thought that was a really interesting dynamic.
Well, I thought it was interesting, too, and the thing that saved the Kevin Costner character for me, and I don't think Kevin Costner is a very good actor, so he's not likely to bring hidden depths to a role that is a little bit cliche.
No hidden depths to hidden figures?
No, not for him. But one of the things that they kind of allude to a lot in the movie, which is the like poor workplace practices at NASA. So where he gets that speech where he's like, call your wives because you're going to be working really late and don't expect any more money. I'm like, si se puede! Like, let's join the union because that's a BS right
no
there.
Way.
Like, my little labor rights person was like,
No.
I'm working longer hours. I'm getting paid more. Like, so I actually found it refreshing that the character wasn't a complete cliche. Like, he wasn't so like great on all possible issues. He was, and I actually did really appreciate the switch in the Jim Parsons character where, we all are in workplaces where people have competed with us and where we've been a threat to somebody else's position and they've tried to work against us. And I did like the part where Kevin Costner as the boss says, like, your job is to find talent and support it, not compete against it. And that's the thing that changes his mind. Yes, I think in some ways it's a cliche, but in other ways I was like, but that is what workplaces are like. I know that dude. I've worked with that dude.
Yeah.
Or woman,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think it even speaks to, when I thought of it, I was thinking about what makes a good boss, right? So it's less of, trying to keep people down and more of like making them shine so that you can shine.
Right.
So instead of, Jim Parsons' role as, to me, which I felt was kind of male fragility, sorry, but I took it that way.
Yeah.
And that, who is this colored girl who's here and who does she think she is, only to and to think so minimal of her, only for her to prove herself. It's unfortunate, but I would agree with you. I think in this day and age we've all been on that side, and so it's just the thought of kind of like being able to rise above that, and like aren't we all kind of working for the same agenda, so to speak, and so I think it was an interesting way in which they kind of work together. I love the one where it was like well, who makes the decision? It was just like, well, you're the boss if you choose to act like
at that moment everyone in the audience that I was sitting with just all gasped like, oh my gosh, she just said that.
Yeah, there were some moments where I'm like, would you say that to your...
I was like, oh my. That was a little cookie. That was cookie.
And she catches herself. She's like, sir.
Yeah, and then pushes up her glasses like, what are you saying?
Oh, yeah. that whole push up the glasses thing, I was like, So every time she would say something smart or like knock like an equation out of the park, she would turn around and then push up her glasses. And I was kind of like, okay.
Cheesy.
I get it.
Yeah. Well, I think though, so I want to circle back to the Octavia Spencer storyline, the Catherine Vaughn storyline, because I think that's, to me, the thing I most liked about the 3 intertwining stories that they told. And I like that they told 3 stories because each had a different aspect to it. And I thought on sort of the Janelle Monáe storyline, I like the fact that there's no white savior, but she does need support and she does need other people to like help her along and encourage her without it being like some man had to come in and like get her the engineering position. Very much she gets it for herself, but she needs somebody to be a cheerleader. And I thought, good, like let's evolve beyond that, storyline. Yeah. So my favorite was the Dorothy Vaughan story because, I do get sick of the American obsession with the like one person who can change the world.
That individualism.
Yeah, like it's not true. It takes a village, whatever. Mm-hmm. But I liked that what they show in her storyline, like you said, Sari, is that she gets ahead through foresight. Like every one of those women is smart, and they're way smarter than everybody else, or they wouldn't be there in the first place. But she sees that they're bringing in this IBM computer and no one knows how to use it. And she teaches herself Fortran and coding and then teaches it to all her employees. So again, takes a village. She doesn't just have the singular accomplishment. She brings everyone along with her because she's smart enough to see the innovation and to make a tactical move to place herself where she needs to be so she can get ahead. And I thought that's a great storyline. That isn't something that you see in movies. You have the like brilliant visionary, but she's not like a brilliant visionary. She just sees a small niche for herself and she grabs it. And I thought, great, that story doesn't get told enough.
And brings everyone with her.
Yeah. Right. I thought that was powerful too, because even when the opportunity for her to then kind of move up, it would be moving up by herself and moving on without her team, and how she was like, my was it what they call the computers?
Yeah.
They got to come with me. You know what I mean? And it was just like, well, I don't know, Kirsten was like, I don't know if we can make that happen. Right. But at the end of the day, I think that was really powerful too, because it wasn't just herself, right? Like she could have totally taken the opportunity, the promotion, and move on. Cause I think they even made her permanent or something. And so it was just like, we got you, keep it moving. And she was like, you know what I mean? I've trained all these people behind me. We all come. We all are going to make it. And that was her counter. I mean, for the simple fact that they could have came back easily and just kind of said, no to the offer, and we'll find another way. I thought that was powerful. So that, opportunity for it to be kind of very individual on her behalf. She was kind of that collective and that foresight of, what's upon us, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, I really like that. Do we want to talk about the men? There was the yucky love stuff story, but it didn't bother me so much.
It was adorable.
It didn't bother me so much.
Very sweet.
Because those little girls were adorable.
They were. They were.
And even the mother, too.
Yeah.
The mother, too. She's just so supportive. Yeah.
We're here. Oh, goodness. What's everyone doing? Yeah. I think it was really cute. I think it was enough to add a little flavor and then kind of give you that kind of outside of work side of things, which I thought was really nice. I don't remember the gentleman's name, but the actor from Moonlight or whatnot, he's just fine. So I always like to look at him.
Yeah, I know.
So I was just like, girl, I'll take the ring if you don't want it.
I was thinking, like, I thought it was going to be me in love with Taraji P. Henson. It was like, I'll just love both of them.
Yes.
We'll be this great, triplet marriage.
Blended family.
No, and I like, so the guy from, again, it's a family trait. Everyone in my family refers to actors by, like, the first thing we ever saw them in. Right. That's how they're known for.
It's like imprinting almost.
Yeah, it's imprinting. So, yeah, Hardison from Leverage, who played Janelle Monáe's husband, was on the TV show Leverage. I liked the development of his character, too. Like, obviously, you know, these women all married men who appreciated their intelligence. And I liked his sense that his change from, it's not that he doesn't support her as much as he just thinks it's futile. And I thought that was fair. Like, I thought it was it doesn't make him to me, it didn't make him the bad guy, that he was like, you're going to jump through hoops, you're going to go through these classes, and you're still not going to get the freaking position anyway. Like, what is the point of this?
Just made him a pessimist, that's all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A realist.
Yeah.
Call it.
Yeah. So, and I didn't.
But I thought that was also a way of kind of reflecting on the times as well. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, here you have these women who are doing all these great things with the backdrop. I even think about Octavia Butler's character when she was taking her young boys. They were going to the library just to get the book. Sure. So, I mean, you have these backdrops of, folks out marching and, you know what I mean, I am a man, you know what I mean? So all these different types of protests on the backdrop of, you know what I mean, all this greatness. So I think, you know, even Janelle Monáe's husband, for lack of any other, you know, way of identifying, I certainly identified him more of kind of maybe like a Black Panther of like, you know what I mean, trying to hold it down, trying to make sure his woman is, you know what I mean, clear as to like what the limitations are, but also recognizing that she's been very successful. So I don't necessarily think he, didn't support her, but I felt like in some ways he was trying to protect her. So I took his,
absolutely. I did too, and I appreciate it.
Like, I don't want you to put so much energy into something that ultimately he believed wouldn't even be attainable.
Right. No, I did appreciate that. I think there are, you know, probably all of us have been that person at one time in our lives where we were like, I don't, you know.
They're all going to laugh at you.
Yeah. And
even if they do.
Yeah. So, and I did think one of the things, you know, for me, the racism message got hammered home like a lot. I don't know if that's a criticism or a compliment of the movie, but I did appreciate the fact that they mixed sort of the levels of it, that they show you the microaggressions that none of the women are ever referred to as Mrs. Whomever when they have to refer to everybody else by that title. And how much that actually means something to the end of the movie. Like, she's accomplished so much, she's gotten a supervisorship, but it still means something when that character looks at her and calls her Mrs. Vaughn. And I think, you know, there's so much debate about microaggressions and all the college campus, and everybody was hating on the kids. And I'm like, but it does mean something. It does mean something when people disrespect you in tiny ways. Yeah. Even when they're disrespecting you in large ways and giving you a separate coffee pot, like, all of it adds up to something. I don't know. What did you think about that?
Well, I guess my one thing would be that, you know, the racism was real. I mean, and so one could argue, and I haven't seen anything. I don't know if anybody has looked into it, but I'd love to hear, because I think Catherine is still alive. So I would love to hear like her take on what she thought of the movie, because one would even be...
She loved it. So NPR did a little thing on it, and they said John Glenn never flew a mission without her checking his figure. Like, he would not get on for the rest of his career.
Can I just say a short note talk about lighting? Every scene John Glenn is in, he looks like he has a halo. And that is totally appropriate. Like, that guy was sort of a larger than life. Like, he was just... Like, from what I've read and, you know, in the Right Stuff and any other accounts, he was just apparently this otherworldly, great guy.
Yeah.
You know, and they really get that across in the movie. And he's the one that, like, when they try to usher him away from shaking the hands with all the, you know, the women of color, the computers of color, I guess. Like, he's like, no, hang on. There's some people down there I haven't met yet. And he goes down there. But that was totally him. That's not an exaggeration.
Yeah. I did appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I guess for me, especially just from the vantage point of an African-American woman, I think, you know what I mean, when looking at it, and I don't know, I didn't necessarily feel like it was hammered. I thought it was...
Yeah, that's why I'm asking you,
yeah,
right?
No,
like,
no,
it's not my lived reality, so... And it certainly wasn't my lived reality in the 60s.
No. So I was just kind of like, touche. I thought it was indicative of probably what they had to endure to some extent. I mean, I even liked the opening piece when they're, on the side of the road. And so you have the police officers just kind of like, oh, I didn't know NASA. And she was like, oh, hired women. Like,
right,
you know what I mean?
Because
in my head, I was going to a whole nother place. Like, oh, what is he about to say? You know what I mean? And so trying to keep that level of like, yeah, we're just trying to do our thing. So it was, for me, I would say that I thought it was not too much, but at the same time, it was interesting to say the least, and still being able to keep doing what you needed to do. I mean, I think even the scenes with Taraji running across.
Oh, I loved, and
I was like, I have to get a depend or something. We'd have to do something. This is doing.
And then you finally see the white boy doing it at the end to go and get her.
Yes.
To run across. That part was great. I liked
like, this is crazy. We're going to go all the way where?
Yeah. I liked that part. I did.
Although I feel like that's just me all the time. Like just always feeling like I'm not sure quite what, where to go. And like everything always just feels like it's half a mile away. I'm always like that on the first day of work. But poor thing.
I know.
That didn't go away from
And I kept thinking, I was like, they're going to think she's not taking her job seriously.
Yeah.
She's going to get fired.
Why didn't any of them say it? Like, that's what drove me nuts. Is when he's like, where is she? They didn't go, oh, well, she has to run, a full mile to go to the restroom. Like, no one says that. Like, we don't know. She's on a break.
I thought on some level that they didn't know.
No. Yeah, no, I thought that was true.
Because it was just like, there's not a restroom on this campus whatsoever. I have to, because I thought that was at least fair. Like, well, where is she? Well, I don't know where she is.
She just takes off.
I don't know.
Yeah. No, I thought, again, in that sort of, all the ways they depict how racism or sexism operates is the well-meaning people who are sitting there going, I don't know where she goes every day. Right? Like,
she's gone again.
Yeah, like, why would you know that? Like,
that's true.
It's not
their reality.
It's not their reality. They don't know that she has to go to, like, they probably never thought about it. Like, that's, the benefit of these kinds of movies and that type of thing is like hopefully make people more aware in their own life. But yeah, like so many times when you get called out on an issue of anything, that is not your personal experience, you're like, oh, yeah, that's really hard. I never really thought about someone.
Well, I was watching like, why doesn't she tell anyone? Excuse me, do you know where? I mean, like, but that's the 2017 version of stuff, right? Like, excuse me, are you aware that I gotta go all the way up? You know what I mean? For her, it was like, do my job. Keep it, you know what I mean? Try not to ruffle any feathers.
Exactly.
I just like that she brought work to the can. She was like,
well, I'm here. Since I'm here, let's do this.
I have to say, I feel like that aspect was written by a man. Because no woman would ever think to like actually try to work on something while she's peeing in the restaurant.
Or at least schlep it all the way across.
Yeah, I just think that was weird that she was carrying it. But at the same time, who knows?
Yes.
But
it's a funny gag, though.
Yeah, it was a funny gag.
Well, another topic that I thought was interesting and that had at least myself as well as the audience that I was watching with chuckling when they kind of looked up and they're like, we don't know what Russia's up to. You know what I mean? Like, I think that whole sentiment of like, just the political landscape was like, some things don't change. So, people were, snickering.
There are scary aspects like that. Or like, we're right back in the 60s?
I'm like, are we? Like, what's happening?
One of the things that I thought they had an opportunity with the one love story, that I thought they missed out on personally as someone who's like been in this situation of having to tell somebody that I'm an economist of like a potential date and just seeing the look in their face where they're like, realization number one trots through his head where he's like, she's really good at math. And then realization number two, she's probably better at math than I am. And then realization number three, I'm not that comfortable with that. Like, just like, and it like washes across their face of like, and they'll usually make some kind of comment of like, oh, you must be good at mad. Like, so he gives her the line of like, oh, I didn't think they let women do something that hard. But he's not at all intimidated by it. And I would have liked to have seen that play out in that character too. Like, the fact that these women have these gigantic brains doesn't seem to put off anybody in the movie. And I'm like, that part to me, they played up the racism aspect a lot.
But
which is fine, but sometimes I felt the sexism,
it's missing. We need a little more sprinkle. You know, and I was thinking the other part too, which I appreciate, just kind of how you broke that down into the 3 different kind of things that would probably wash over people. I did kind of find it like, oh, okay. And, you know, his comeback later was like, my apologies. You know what I mean? I certainly didn't mean what I said. I didn't mean to offend you, that type of thing. But then again, I was like, well, Taraji is a hottie. So he's probably like, I'll take that brain anyway it comes. Right. On one end, there's racism, but on the other end, there is sexism.
Right. And there, like, one, again, interplay of that was that character. And he's like, he's just kind of crappy towards women, but he doesn't ever seem intimidated. And I thought it would be nice. I thought that's how they were going to run it, with him being like the colonel in the military and being like, ooh, she's like smarter than I am. I don't know how cool I am with that. You know what I mean?
Or even just the sentiment, and this could be me being, generalizing, but, is she going to be good at taking orders or, falling into line? Because let's keep in mind, there's a real kind of role of, what it means to be a woman. I would even say what it means to be a Black woman.
Right.
You know what I mean? So all of those different things tied in, which didn't show up, but I certainly would see that being a storyline that could have been developed.
But again,
they do kind of touch on, as you said, to kind of be fair to the men. I find myself doing that a lot because I like to try to, as a lot of us do, I think, in the feminist movement, try to pull men into the feminist movement, right?
Right.
And they do touch on the aspect of, the Kirsten Dunst's character is a great example, but also the white female coworker that Taraji P. Henson works with. She is that kind of typical example of, she's that token Smurfette in that department. And so she works even harder to alienate, this woman of color who comes in. She knows that she's so low on the totem pole that she has to distance herself that much more from this new person to protect her status, like what little status she has. And so she almost treats her worse than anyone else in the department.
That's interesting because I got a different vibe from her. I think, I will say that, when she came in, like, oh, where do I sit? And it was like, oh, yeah. And then she looks up and it's just like, that look like, oh, okay. Yeah. But she also gave her, some advice, which I thought, given the circumstance, she could have been a lot more ice cold and just go sit over there. But if I recall correctly, she gave her, advice. I think something along the lines of like, he's not really personable. Make sure you kind of just get your work done. Try not, it was something short, but it was almost kind of like, best of luck to you, kid. He's been burning through a lot of people. Yeah. And so I guess one could take it as like, diss, but the other could be like, I'm just giving you some insight. Like, you know what I mean? Try not to be too touchy-feely. Just get the work done. You're sitting over there.
Fair enough. If he's burning through people, she may be like, I'm not investing in somebody else. But I do think, to your point, and something that, today was the Women's March that we are recording, something that has long been a criticism, especially of that wave of feminism, was lack of intersectionality. For those who don't know, intersectionality is that, feminism needs to really touch all women. All women are in the movement, and the vast criticism of the early, or the 60s, 70s wave of feminism was that it really only focused on white women's achievement. And so that's very much at play in this movie, that the white women in it, they don't see the sisterhood. Like, you're right. They're, in no way, shape, or form are they see the Black women almost universally as competition or something to just be ignored, like that has nothing to do with them. So they're not, you would kind of wish that the one other woman in the frickin' department would take her under her wing a little bit and help her along. Yeah. Like, I get what you're saying, Sari, but at the same time, like, with modernized, and it's not a modern story, like, you would think that if some woman was the only woman in your department, you'd kind of be like, let's stick together. There's only two of us, but the color thing is just too big a barrier for them to get past. And I think that's, a relevant and still, frankly, a timely criticism.
Well, it's interesting. What I would say for this one, I think that Catherine's role and then the white woman who was her supervisor, I see that different than the woman who was in the office, because I took her kind of on the lower end of the totem pole as well. In that, it's almost like I didn't feel like she had enough kind of clout to do. So I almost gave her a bit of a pass in the sense that, and I know it sounds terrible, but I just like, for lack of a better way of explaining it, I thought she was like the secretary. So I may have misunderstood her role, but I think Catherine's supervisor, who was, I would say, in a position to be able to do a little bit more, I expected more from her, and seeing that not be a sisterhood off the jump was disheartening. But I think it also reflected the potential for it being competition, right, or staying in your place, right, because we're still dealing with the fact that they're going to colored women's restrooms. I mean, so I think that dichotomy, and then, kind of the mindset a bit. So I guess I was kind of expecting that, It seemed kind of like par for the course. It was a bummer. Yeah, but I almost feel like if it was too like, what's up, sister? I'd be like, okay, now what's going on here? Like, this doesn't seem to fit.
I think you're right. It shouldn't fit, and you did expect it. But I think, again, it's a great commentary on the fact that white women haven't been the allies that they need to be oftentimes for other women. Gotcha. Right? They took what they could get out of feminism and
just clawed their way out.
Yeah, they were like, "Oh, good, affirmative
we
action.
We see the light.
Yeah,
we're here.
Action, bring it. Like,
good luck to you guys back there.
Sorry, I'm gonna jump to the head of the line.
I've left some breadcrumbs. Hopefully, you get here.
Good luck to you.
That's what I thought. I was just like, deuces. Every woman for yourself.
Right.
Grab that pussy and keep it moving. They were just out. So I think if it was anything more, I don't know if we could talk about this portion of it, but there are a few things in particular. I was really excited about the amount of buzz the movie got, because I think, I initially did not realize, but then it kind of just started to like really pick up, and then it was like it started trending, which was really great.
Let me hold you there, because this is a good point to transition to what we call our impact score, our movies that matter impact score. So it goes from 1 to 10. 1 being like nobody saw this movie or cared about it, and it failed to land on any social relevance, and or like it was a terrible movie. And then 10, which is, again, on both scales, on the social issue front and on the movie front, like movies and, life as we know it has changed forever. So on that 1 to 10 scale, and you get to imagine it however you want, Sari, like you're talking about the buzz and the impact. So like what do you think about how this movie is kind of rolling out into America?
I think the one thing I would say, I would certainly give it a high score. I think knowing what I knew going into it, I'd give it an 8. I thought it was really great. I think knowing that there are a lot of people who know nothing about these women, know nothing about the simple fact that, they were these African-American individuals who were working for NASA. I give it a 10 because I really find it remarkable. I usually only hear about these folks come, Black History Month is which we talk about people, and sometimes Catherine is mentioned, sometimes not. But I think on the relevance of just kind of American history, I think there's something really remarkable about it, and so I give it a 10 in the realm of like knowing that my nieces are really kind of galvanized and like, wow, this is really great, and then really kind of having conversations with people who are like, oh, I didn't realize that, Black women were, and like legitimately did not know, because, for various different reasons. But I look at it kind of through those two scores.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Stacy?
I would say 7. Just from, the aspects that we've discussed, the fact that audiences have responded so well to it, it's been a hit. I think we're going to see a lot of it at the Oscars.
Hashtag Oscars not so white.
Right, yeah, right, exactly. It's timely.
Okay.
You want to touch on that? Before
you finish, I want to say this for the record. I think the Oscars are stupid. I stopped watching when they nominated Tom Cruise for Jerry Maguire. But I do...
What year was that, by the way?
It was a long time ago, but I was like, really, Tom Cruise, I'm out. I'm out. Academy, I'm out. But I think the Oscars so white thing is incredibly relevant and incredibly important. And at the same time, it pisses me off than this sort of, I hope there is not a quote unquote like affirmative action backlash where then people are like, oh, they only got the Oscar this year because everyone's been complaining about the lack of diversity, where the movies that are getting the good buzz absolutely deserve it and would deserve it in any year without,
the buzz.
So I hate when people like try to take away people's accomplishments for that reason. Anyway, keep going.
But haters keep on hating. So
haters gonna hate.
That's not gonna stop. And the Oscars, they technically, in life, they don't matter except for they determine what gets wide releases
right
immediately following. So, I don't think that'll be a concern for this movie because, as we've all mentioned, it's getting a lot of coverage. But I think
it helps those people get roles too. Like Octavia Spencer's career,
that's true.
Definitely. And come on, she was doing great work before that.
She's set.
But
she's set.
Yeah,
everyone knows who she is.
Yeah. But without that Oscar nod, she would have kept playing black friend roles or whatnot.
The sassy best friend.
Yeah.
Making pies.
Making pies.
Anyway, I'm sorry. I did interrupt you, so keep going.
Okay, let's see. I think that because it's being so widely watched, I think that first scene with the police officer, I think it was a very palatable scene for a more mainstream audience. To kind of consider the Black Lives Matter movement, because it was, it wasn't a young man in a hoodie, which is sometimes unpalatable for a mainstream audience, for better or for worse, mostly worse. It was, these three likable female characters that even in the first 3 minutes, you've already connected with them. And now you're on their side when the cop pulls up. And now you're seeing it. You have to see it from their perspective. So I think that'll be good for people I won't mince my words. It'll be good for a white audience to perceive from that perspective. So the one other thing I wanted to add on the impact was just the whole STEM aspect, obviously. Women in STEM. Or in tech right now is a kind of a big issue.
Yeah, early women programmers, right? The first people to program the computer are females.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And, discussing that was really important as someone who, I excelled in sciences and math when I was younger and had, was in a physics lab once and had the TA kind of come up to me and try to give me like a pep talk.
He mansplained something to you?
He did, yeah. And I kind of like let him go, and he was just very well-meaning. And at the end, he went, you'll start to pick it up over as the semester goes on. So, for instance, what did you make on your last exam? And I went, a 97. And he goes, I guess you got the hang of it then.
Yeah, I guess you did, Stacy. I guess you did.
Thanks for the pep talk.
Yeah. But I feel a lot better.
Yeah.
Boss.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Coach.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was nice to see that aspect as well.
Right. So I think the highest impact score we gave out on this podcast was for Zootopia because, it was aimed at children and you're like, well, if you're going to change the world, that's probably a good place to start. And I love, Sari, that you brought your nieces. And I do think that, young women of color are going to see this movie and think, there are ways that that I can, be successful in a career where people don't necessarily think I'm the right look for that career. And I also really liked the opening of the movie is actually Catherine is a little girl in school and having someone say, this kid's got something and she needs more. But again, I still love, it isn't a white savior story. She does not go to a white school. She goes to a black school. that is set up for that. And while part of me wanted to go learn more about how any of these women, white or black, got to be computers at NASA, like, what were they doing that they had these opportunities, like, what opportunities were there that they took advantage of? Because I don't really know. But it did make me want to learn more about, like, how did that happen? Who are all these women who were so good at math, NASA was forced to hire them when they would rather not, right? Like, they had to have been that good that somebody was like, well, we better start a program for this because we can't, we can't ignore the talent pool. So yeah, I would definitely give it an 8 on the impact score. Again, it's not the best movie ever, so I can't give it the full 10. But I was really pleased with how good a story they told. I love that they did the 3 women. I think that's the best part of the movie.
Yeah.
If they'd just done one of them, I don't think I would have liked the movie as much.
And I think it really drove home that, I think you were sort of touching on that just now, the idea that, you can't possibly get your best product out. And when you're sending people into outer space, you want the best people you have available working on your project. And when you are limiting your talent pool to 30% of your population, i.e. white males, when you're counting out and just completely disregarding 70% of your human capital, you're not going to get anyone to the moon.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just think that's such a huge
and I also think when you were mentioning, and it bears kind of knowing even more about their kind of biography and more about them, but remembering when the school was the school that you needed to go to really help develop her, and the fact that it was going to be costly, in that I guess the school and the teachers went ahead and pulled money. So I think it ties back to it takes a village, right? So recognizing that there's talent, you know what I mean, we've given you all that we can give you here, like there's nothing else here for you, and we wish you the best, and here's what we could muster up, and because I think it required them to move or whatnot, and make their way for her so she could continue her education. So I think it's powerful stuff.
Right, I agree, and I think that's a good point. Also, in the impact is that there's a lot of pitfalls it doesn't fall into, and it doesn't fall into these women are so exceptional and they did it all on their own. Like, it's very clear they didn't do it all on their own. Mm-hmm. Or if they did do it on their own, they used their power to help bring everybody along with them. Like, it's not it's not a story of like the rugged individual that makes it.
It was earned for sure.
Yeah. And there are just not enough of those stories.
Yeah.
So things that are good though, which this movie was. Recommendations. Sari, do you have anything you want to recommend for our listeners?
No, it was interesting because I saw this and actually back to back on one day, and then saw Fences another day. So it was almost kind of like powerful Black stories.
Okay.
So it was
quite a day.
It was quite a day, and I think it's just really remarkable. So I would certainly advocate Fences would be a recommendation if people haven't seen it.
Great. Stacy?
I recently rented Hell or High Water. And I just want to plug that for, as we mentioned earlier, a couple of us went to the Women's March on Washington earlier. And at this, tumultuous time in our country's history, I think a lot of, mainstream Americans and elitist progressives are all kind of looking, at least from where we are on the East Coast, looking west to kind of try to understand a huge portion of our population that elected our most recent president, and trying to, for lack of a better phrase, get in their heads and just see what's going on there.
Yeah.
And I think the film Hell or High Water, well, it's not the greatest film I've ever seen. It was certainly very good. It really does try to, well, it doesn't try to explain everything. It does definitely venture in the direction of trying to understand Americans in poor rural areas who feel like everyone is their enemy. So I would definitely check that out.
So my recommendation for the week is, I honestly wanted to hate it too, the new One Day at a Time Netflix show. It a reboot of the original mom with single mom, 2 kids. This version, the family is Cuban. She's a vet. She served in Afghanistan. It's all social issues in your face with its stuff. It's hilariously funny. I so enjoyed it. And I just thought, oh God, it's a single camera sitcom. Like, this is going to be so dumb. And it's
single camera.
Oh, not single camera, multi-camera. Like, it's like the old fashioned,
Like, do they have an audience?
Yeah. I thought it was going to be painful one-liners and canned laughter. And in fact, it was just, it was really funny. So, I definitely say check out One Day at a Time, streaming on Netflix now. And I think that's it for us. So we hope you enjoyed this episode of Movies That Matter. If you did, please take a second to leave a review on iTunes and recommend it to your friends. And stay tuned for the special call for help at the end of the episode. If you want to talk to us, you can go to the website, moviesthatmatterpodcast.com. My Twitter handle is @Funarini. So remember, movies matter.
And so do you.
We will see you next time. Movies That Matter is looking to update the intro and outro music used on the show. If you'd like to send a recording of original music, please go to the website, moviesthatmatterpodcast.com, and use the form to contact me. You would be credited on the show and on the website for your contribution. Remember, movies matter, and so does music.